Okay, so in our last demo, we talked a little bit about doing nighttime lighting, but I ran into some software problems and Maya stopped cooperating, and so I cut it short, and so I'm going to pick back up here and just finish the last part of that lecture. Okay, so if we're doing a environment lighting of any kind, we first always start with a direct light source, and that's our source of light that basically creates shadows. And so for this example, it would be like moonlight. That would be my direct light source. And then the indirect light source in my scene is going to be any of the bounced light that, say, comes off of the floor and then bounces up to the ceiling, or bounces off of the buildings outside into the window. And the indirect light is very diffuse light, so it really doesn't have a shadow source. So it just kind of comes off being really soft. But in order to have a lighting of a three-dimensional scene using physical-based rendering, we actually need those two components pretty much every single time. So I'm going to create my direct light source first. So in this case, I'm just going to do like a soft moonlight coming through the window. And so for that, I'm going to use my directional light. And then directional lights are always pathetically tiny. So I'm always going to select that guy, and instead of scaling it here, which could throw things off, I'm actually going to go into the attribute editor, and I'm going to go to the object display and just change the locator scale, which doesn't affect the light in any way. It just changes the icon. So I'm going to come in here and grab my little pitchforks here, and I got my moonlight. If I was wanting to colorize the light so that it was consistent with moonlight, I could use my little cheat sheet that I gave you guys. So in the ref here, I have a color temperatures cheat sheet, and right there we have moonlight, which is 4100 to 4150 Kelvin, and which is just kind of like a pale peach. And so I'm going to use that as my reference. You would think it would be blue, but this is the physically accurate coloration. I usually start with that, and then if I don't like it, then I change it from there. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to try that and just see what it looks like. But if I don't like it, I can always tint it more blue for artistic effect. All right, so I tinted my light source. The next thing I want to do is I want to check the intensity. So I'm going to come over here and do a little render. And the first thing I notice is that I see it's rendering at full frame, which is not good because it's going to take forever. So I want to come in here and pause this for a second by clicking on the little stop button. And then I want to change the test resolution to something much lower, 25%. There we go, much faster. And what I want to do is set my intensity here on my direct light source so that it's consistent with my artistic vision. So right now that feels pretty good, but I think I want it a little bit more intense. So I'm going to come in here to the Arnold tab on the light, and I'm going to use the exposure instead of the intensity. So you can change the light intensity using that value right there, but the problem is that the values get really ridiculous and it becomes hard to use. So instead of using intensity, we're going to use the Arnold setting of exposure, which is a lot more friendly, user-friendly, and straightforward. So I usually just start out at 5 to see how that looks. And 5 actually isn't too bad. It's kind of like, like a bright full moon type of a look. Maybe a little bit too hot on the moon, so I'll back that off to a 4. And then maybe for this moonlight scene, I don't like the warm light that they told me to use, and I'm going to make this thing cooler, and I'm going to make it like a blue. I'll make it like a pale blue. There we go. And I like this a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to go with that. The next thing I want to do is I want to create my indirect light source. So for that guy, I'm going to, this is a good idea. Since Arnold is always rendering, which is awesome if you have a fast computer, but if you don't have a fast computer, you kind of want to get in the habit in the Arnold render view of always stopping it. Because if you don't, what's happening is this thing is minimized, and you might be like, why is Maya so slow? I can't do anything. It's because that Arnold render view is calculating and rendering every time you change anything, which again on a slow computer can be a problem. Now on a fast computer like mine at home, it's awesome because I have two monitors and I just throw this guy on the other monitor and I can sit there and do everything I'm doing and it doesn't really slow me down. But when you're using slower stuff, you have to learn how to work with that, and that's the case here. So I'm going to turn that guy off, and then I'm going to create my indirect light source, which is my Skydome light. And then for my Skydome light, I'm going to use my reference that I had in the folder here, which was, I kind of liked this little sunset, or almost like a moonlit. I think it's sunset technically, but really to me this feels more moonlit. And so I'm going to use this as my reference, and I'm going to create a gradient that kind of has this feeling. So I'm going to come in here to Maya, and on my Skydome light, I'm going to go to the color node, and right here on the checker box, I'm going to create a render node. And I want to use a ramp, which is essentially a gradient. And then for my ramp, I'm going to go from a deep blue, midnight blue, to, I'm just going to kind of reuse that color again. Come on. Oh, I thought I had it clicked. Okay, so I'm going to click that guy, and I'm going to reuse that color. There we go. For my ground, and then I'm going to just bring in some blue, lighter blue here at the horizon.
Oh, so that's how you can be able to change the lighting.
Uh-huh.
That's really cool.
And then I probably want that a little bit more blue though.
Sorry, my bad.
Okay, and then I'm gonna quickly take that back to like dark midnight blue. So what I want is just like a little bit of horizon. There we go. And I can kind of see that peeking through my window, and really it's just to add a little bit of character there. And then I don't want to use the Maya render view, I'm going to use the Arnold view. And now that I have my background in there, I can crank it up, and currently it's just a little bit on the bright side, so that's skewing a little bit daylight there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring down the value. I'm going to cut the value in half for each one of these so that it reads more nighttime. And then for this one, same deal. There we go. Okay, now I've got a more believable night sky here that is in harmony with my direct light source. And then the next thing I want to do is, okay, so now I have a baseline for my direct light source, but in a nighttime scene, we would never have this illumination unless someone was about to get murdered in here or something. So if someone's actually living in here, then we would have a combination of artificial lights. And so the way artificial lights work are, you want to use a light source that is physically consistent with the light source that you're using in your scene. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to this little desk lamp, or side table lamp. And what I want to do is create a little reading lamp here. And so this type of light is just your regular incandescent light bulb. And this light source actually emanates light out from a point in space in 360 degrees. So the best type of computer light to use to emulate that light source would be over here in the create lights, and it would be a point light, because a point light emanates light out from one point in space out equally in 360 degrees. So I'm going to create a point light. And then of course Maya always builds everything at the origin, which is kind of annoying. Where's my light? It's at the origin. And then I'm going to grab this light and move it over here. A little trick that I have for moving lights and objects is I like to hit the V key, that's V as in Victor, and see that temporarily turns on the snap to vertex. And I like to just grab that guy and snap it right over there and I'll put it right on the light bulb. So I'm going to snap it right to that light bulb. And now that it's right on that light bulb, what I want to do is, it'd be tempting as a newbie to computer graphics to be like, well, that light source should go right inside of that light bulb, right? Because that's how it is in the real world. The filament is actually inside the glass. But in this case, because we're in the computer world where we're faking everything, that's not always the best technique. That can sometimes create a whole host of other problems that I don't want to go into. And so to avoid problems, the best way to create my synthetic light is actually to just put it outside of my geo. And you can just trust me that that's going to fake as if that light is coming from inside the light bulb, even though it's not. All right. So I'm going to put it right there. I'm going to look at my cheat sheet again. So this is an incandescent bulb. And so I'm going to say incandescent light bulb. Okay, there's my color. It's kind of an orangish peach. So I want to always change the light source color. This is the worst color you can possibly have. Hospital white / physics death white. It's like the God light. No good. So I'm going to come in here and change this to an incandescent, more saturated orange. And then I'll peach it up a little bit, but I like that. That looks pretty good. All right, and now I want to set the intensity for this light. So I'm again going to go to the Arnold tab, and I'm going to use the exposure because it's so much easier to use. I usually always start with 5. 5 is just kind of like a good value because I know it's going to read, and then I can get a baseline for like how bright or not bright I need to make that. Okay, so my baseline is very dim, way too dim. So I kind of want this to look like a 60-watt light bulb, which is kind of a standard for a side table lamp, either a 40-watt or a 60-watt, and that's way too dim. So I'm going to come over here to my exposure, and I'm going to double the value. Oh yeah, that's reading better. And so now instantly by doing that, it starts to feel more like a reading lamp that's on the side of a bed. But I'm kind of in close right now. So because I'm in close, and we can see the shadow here being cast from the lampshade. You can see that here and here. I'm in too close though, so I want to see how this reads from across the room. So I'm going to pause it for a second and go across the room. And then re-render it. Yeah, that feels pretty good. That's starting to feel fairly natural. I probably could crank it up a little bit more because I want it to bleed into the side walls a little bit more. I'm getting a little bit of bleed here, but I want a little bit more. So I'm going to go maybe like to a 12. There we go. That's kind of what I wanted. All right, that looks good. All right, the other thing that we notice here is that after I get my intensity set up, which I'm also kind of overdoing whenever I lecture, I always like overdo things a little bit so they read. So if you're looking at this going, oh, he's got that way too blown out. You're right, I did that on purpose so that it's kind of obvious, because I find that students tend to be too sheepish, so I'm like trying to train you to be a little bit more over the top with the stuff that you do. And then next week I'll see like nothing but over the top stuff, and I'll be like, okay, now back it down. But I'd rather see you go a little bit more aggressive than be too wimpy. So, okay, so I got this thing a little bit overexposed. I'm going to live with it. The next thing I want to do is, like, if you'll notice, if I zoom in here, the shadow is kind of harsh, right? And in the real world, shadows are not that hard. So what I want to do here is I want to talk about softening the shadow on this light. And we do that in Arnold by changing the radius here. The radius is basically how diffuse the light is. So if I give this thing a higher radius, you can see here that it's going to have the effect of kind of blurring that shadow out, and that shadow is instantly going to look more realistic. So I probably went a little bit too far with it. I don't mind having a little bit of a hard shadow. I just didn't want it to have a dark side of the moon, sharp shadow. So I'm going to cut that in half. Maybe I'll go to like a 2. Yeah, 2 looks pretty good, actually. Cool, so I just softened that shadow a little bit to make that a little bit more realistic. And then I'm pretty happy with that light. I just want to talk about one other thing. If I zoom in here on the light, and why is my computer going so slow? Because I forgot to disable the render. Okay, so I want to zoom in on this light so that I can render it a little bit closer so I can show you guys something else. So check this out. If I render that, it looks pretty good, right? Oh yeah, oh, soft shadows, dude, he's so good. But if we look at the light bulb, that light bulb doesn't quite look right? Because if that light was truly on, that bulb surface would be white hot. And so we're not with our simulation here, completing the illusion. So I want to show you how to use something that's not a light that will help us complete the illusion to make that light bulb look like it's actually giving off light, when in fact it's not. It's that point light that's outside the light bulb giving off the light. So I'm going to show you through material how to accomplish this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the light bulb, and I'm going to right click on it and say assign new material. And the material I want to assign again is an Arnold standard surface. So it's AI. I don't know why it's not coming up, because I didn't have the Arnold thing highlighted. So it's an Arnold shader, and it's AI standard surface, this one right here. I always usually just type AI in there first to kind of narrow it down, and then if you put an S behind this, I think it'll narrow it down even farther. So AIS, and there we go, AI standard surface. That's what I want to use. If we use the AI standard surface, I talked to you guys a little bit about the base color and the specular color, and we talked about transmission, which is transparency, and I want to talk about a fourth thing, which is emission. Emission is a value that we can use to make a material appear as though it is like emanating light. And so if I use the emission, it will also give off indirect light. It won't give off any direct rays, but it'll give off indirect rays. So what I want to do here is I want to give the light bulb an incandescent color, and I'm just going to use that same one I used for the light source. And then I'm going to use the emission weight, and the emission weight, I'm going to do this one in real time here. The emission weight will make this thing look like it is illuminated. So you can see that as I crank the weight up, that light bulb is starting to go more and more kind of yellowy hot. And if I take it all the way to the top, it will look like in fact that bulb is actually emanating light when in fact it's doing nothing. I believe that the emission weight can also go beyond 1. So if you wanted to make that more intense, it's a linear value, which means it can go to almost infinity. So you can go beyond 1. So if you're like, nah man, that doesn't look cranked out enough, at a certain point it won't be able to do any more because it can only have a white pixel. But there we go. So I cranked it up to 10, and like, okay, now it looks like that light bulb is really, really on, and it's really emitting light. And then now I've completed the illusion. So now that looks like a believable side lamp, and now I can move on to the rest of my scene. So I'm going to pause the render, and then the next light I want to do is the overhead lamp, which is right in here. So this guy. And rather than redoing everything I just did, I am actually just going to duplicate that light and reuse that guy. So I'm going to use my little move trick here of snapping to vertex, and I'm going to snap it right to that light bulb. And then I want it to be outside the geometry. Cool. And then I'm also going to select that bulb, and I'm going to give it the same material that I put on the other bulb. And so just because I like organizing things, I'm going to select this material, so material attributes, and I'm going to make sure that I give this thing a descriptive name. So this is my AI light bulb. I could even be more incandescent light bulb. Okay, and then I'm going to apply that same guy, that same Arnold shader to this geometry so that this guy also looks like the light bulb is illuminated. So I'm going to say assign existing material, AI incandescent light bulb. And now I've just got super bang for my buck because I did one light and I'm reusing it. And now I'm going to render it to see how it looks in the scene, to see if it looks like I want it to. And it's not too bad, I actually don't mind that. So now I'm getting light here from the side table, I'm getting light from the overhead, and you can see that it has illuminated my room a little bit more, giving it a little bit more character. And so now we have a reasonably nighttime looking scene, which is awesome. Another thing I forgot to talk about last time was the noise. So you can see here that we've got a little bit of noise and a little bit of fireflies in the scene. And there's actually an extra trick that we can do to minimize that. So if you're looking at those fireflies and that noise and it's killing you, you're going to want to do the next step. And that is creating something called a portal light. So I'm going to stop the render here so that it doesn't slow down my computer, and I'm going to create a light called a portal light. So it's under the Arnold lights and light portal. And what a light portal does is you can think of it like a light reflection card. So if you've ever been on a photo shoot and there's like someone standing next to the talent with either a gold or a white card and it's bouncing light up onto the subject, this is kind of what a light portal does. A light portal basically is a light collector. So it'll take all the indirect light in the scene and all the direct light in the scene, and it will bounce it wherever you want it to. So I'm going to create a light portal, and then I'm going to hit W to move it. And these things look kind of weird. It just looks like a plane, and it's a plane with a line, and that line tells you that's the direction that the portal light is going. So if I was pointing this reflection card on the talent on the set of a movie or something, I would point that line right at the talent. So I'm going to grab this thing and I'm going to scale it up. And then I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. And for some reason it's giving me weirdness. There we go, 90 degrees. And the way these things work is you want to put them like right outside the openings. So any opening you have in your scene, window, door, whatever, you're going to put one of these like right outside the opening and just make it a little bit bigger than the opening. That's all you got to do. And it's tempting to do this, to just have one of these guys and scale it to fit the entire space. I'm just going to tell you that doesn't work as well. So it works, but not as well. So it's best to do one of these for each opening. So I'm going to make one, and then I'm going to duplicate it and put another one there in the window. And it may not even be noticeable. So, but it is to me. You can just trust me. I know I say that a lot, but please do. I've been doing this for 20 years. Longer, if I'm honest. And it's going to minimize that noise. So I'm going to bank this image here to create a saved copy. And then hopefully it'll be really obvious after I re-render this that the noise is diminished. But usually what happens is it reduces the noise by about 50%, which is not totally noticeable to the naked eye. So you just have to trust me. It's reducing the noise. Here, let's see if I can get it to, if we side by side them. Oh yeah, there it is. So I'm glad that it made me not a liar. But you can really see it up here in the ceiling and on the walls, how much noise it reduced. So it'll speed up the render times, improve the quality, and reduce the noise. And that's all you got to do. Those lights don't have an intensity or anything because they're essentially reflection cards. And truly, they're not reflection cards. They're more like a magnifying glass. It's more like a light collector than a reflection card. But everyone knows a reflection card, so that's what I use as my analogy. Okay, so now that I have that, now we have a pretty decent nighttime scene. I'm just going to show you one more thing that I should not even be showing you, but I just do it because it's so fun and it looks so good. I'm going to show you guys how to make, using the techniques I just showed, to make something that looks like a neon sign. So I've got this nifty little circle over here that we're going to turn into a neon sign. And so I'm going to select this guy and say assign new material. I'm going to give it an AI standard surface. And this one I'm going to call, where did it go? I'm going to call it AI neon. And I'm going to go to the emission, and I'm going to give this like a nice hot pink. And then I'm going to take it up to 100% weight. And then we will get out of render mode and check it out. I've got myself a neon sign. Now, it already looks pretty good as is, and if I wanted to crank that more, I could do that. You can see when I over crank it, it's starting to create other problems. And that's because by nature, indirect light is noisy. So That's why you always have to use indirect light with direct light, because the two work together. It's like peanut butter and jelly. So because I cranked that up too high, now I've got tons of fireflies and noise in here. So I can't do that. I got to take that down to a 2. And now that looks pretty good. And the way we want to think of this is, if I'm trying to do a neon sign, I can only do a portion of the task using the indirect emission. I also want to use a direct light source to have this little neon sign also kick out shadows and stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat this guy by using a point light. Whoops, I better turn off my renderer first. By using a point light to make it look like this guy is also putting out direct light. So I'm going to say create lights. I'm going to do a new point light. And then I'm going to move it up. I'm going to do my little cheater move. Move it over there. And I'm just going to put it kind of dead center on that light, and I'm going to kick it out a foot or so from the light source. And then I'm also going to give this light a nice hot pink color. And then I'm going to give it an intensity under, not intensity, I want to give it an exposure value. I always start at 5, that's just kind of that's my number. And then I'm going to render this again, and I should have banked the last one, so I'll bank it. And then we'll render this guy again, and now we should get a little bit less noise. And this guy is now capable of kicking out shadows just like a regular neon light would do. And so my light source, you can see it's reading a little bit better. Let's side by side them. No, not much difference. I thought it was. Okay, so I want to go in here to the exposure and crank it up a little bit more. I'm going to go to a 10. There we go. Now we can see a difference. All right, and now we can see that, okay, this one looks a lot more convincing. And that looked pretty good, so I'm tempted to try to break it. So I'm going to go to 15. Oh, I broke it. The reason why that went up so much from 10 to 15 is because it's an exponential value. So adding an extra 1 to it is actually more than 10%. It's like, I don't know with math, but it's a logarithmic value. So I'm going to try an 11. There we go. And I'm kind of digging that because now you can see here all in the desk and on the sidewall. And over here we're getting that neon light to kind of contribute and complement these incandescent lights and their warm color. And then we got the blue outside. And so I'm kind of digging this. Maybe it's just my initial lighting comp. And then I'll show you one more trick. So we used, in that example, I used incandescent plus indirect to simulate a neon light. And I'll just do one more magic thing that is a fun one. So for this guy, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do one of these like backlit keyboards. So like this guy. So all I need in order to accomplish this one is I need a plane. So I'm going to make a plane. Scale it up. All right, cool. I don't need all of these edges though. They are redundant. So get rid of those. All right, and then I want to use another gradient. So gradients, I love it when things overlap. When I show you one thing and then I can reuse that thing 100 times. Uh-oh, fat fingered it. And this is a case. So I used a ramp before. I'm going to use a ramp again. All I'm doing here is placing this thing so it's kind of the right size to fit right inside of that keyboard. That works pretty well. All right, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a ramp on here. So I'm going to say assign new material. And I want to do an AI standard again. I'll call this one AI keyboard. And for the emission, instead of just using a solid color, I'm going to use an image, or a node. So I'm going to click on Create Render Node, and I'm going to use a ramp. And the ramp I want to use is Roy G. Biv. So red, orange. I bet you guys didn't know that science class was going to come in handy someday. Yellow. Green. Blue. Yeah, blue. Indigo. There we go. And then finally, whoops, violet. Alright, cool. Spread those out a little bit. And then if I hit the 6 key, I should be able to see that in there. It's not showing yet. I'm going to try turning the emission weight down. Oh crap, I put that in the wrong node. So that belonged in the color, not the weight. So I'm going to break the connection. And then I'm just going to go to the Windows Rendering Editors Hypershade. And I'm going to find that ramp that I just made and just drag it right into the... So what I'm doing here is I'm middle mouse grabbing this, middle mouse, and dragging it over into the color slot. Let go. And now it's hooked up. And now we can see it. It's on there. All right, cool. And now I'm going to do a render to just see how it looks. Oh yeah, that looks pretty good. And now to complete the entire effect, I'm going to bury it inside of that keyboard. So the guy who modeled this scene actually works at Pixar, and so he knows his crap. That's why I love to use his scene files, because they're basic, but they are modeled properly. And so I just bury that little light source into that keyboard, and now I can re-render this. And check it out. I've got a backlit keyboard. And if I want to crank it up, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go to a 10 on this one and see what happens. There we go. All right, cool. And that's it. I showed you way too much lighting for a modeling class. But that one's kind of easy to do and fun. So when I can, I indulge you guys with fun stuff. All right, cool. Let's just do one more render of the whole scene. There we go. All right, cool. So now you guys have enough lighting to do like really awesome renders for your room. For the final project, I'm always looking for, we're going to do one daylight set and we're going to do a nighttime set. So you can start thinking about how cool you want to make your nighttime set. And now you've got a whole new bag of tricks to make it awesome. All right, good luck. See you next time.